If you struggle with agoraphobia, you really need to watch this video. So a lot of people think agoraphobia is the fear of going outside, but that's actually not true. Agoraphobia is not about fearing of going outside, but fearing how you're gonna feel if you go outside. Now, agoraphobia is actually the consequence of anxiety. It's not a separate problem. A lot of people think agoraphobia is its own thing. It's actually not. It's a second order consequence of the anxiety. For example, what happens if you get a panic attack and you go outside? So what happens is you just avoid going. What happens if you have a panic attack and you can't escape? What happens if you have anxiety in a certain situation you can't leave? What happens if this happens? What happens if that happens? What happens if you're driving and you're losing control? Do you see what happens? A lot of these things are actually signs of anxiety. And what happens as a consequence is people start avoiding those situations. And what happens is that their avoidance becomes so extreme that they can't leave their house. Now look, there's varying degrees of this, okay? There's some people that will refuse to leave their house. They may work remote, or they may not work at all. They get all their groceries delivered. Or there's some people that will avoid certain situations. They will just avoid concerts, or they'll avoid going to the movie theater, or in a crowded space where they feel like they can't escape. Sometimes people will not travel because what happens if something happens and they need to run away? And so what happens with these individuals is that even though they're at home and they're comfortable, their quality of life dramatically drops. They also lose a lot of confidence in themselves. They feel like they're fragile, and their what we call core confidence ends up disappearing. So what's happening here? People who are agoraphobic, what happens is that they respond to the anxiety the same way, which is avoidance. I don't want to feel it. I don't want to feel it. I don't want to feel it. And then what happens actually is that the anxiety starts generalizing. This is why you hear the term generalized anxiety disorder. Why is it generalized? Like, what is causing the anxiety? Well, it's nothing. It's nothing in particular. They're just feeling anxious in situations where they shouldn't. Now, really what's happened is they've taught their nervous system that everything is a threat. And so what happens is that the nervous system says, hey, this may be a threat. And then if you respond in avoidance, well, then the nervous system says, yep, that's a threat. And so we're going to avoid situations like that. For example, let's say you had a panic attack while driving. Now you stop driving because every time you go in the car, you get like this panic sensation, even though you're not objectively thinking about it or rationally thinking about it. So the nervous system says, okay, Shaan can't drive. And so anytime we're in a situation where he's in a car, we're going to give him that panic sensation. But what you start seeing is that this also starts happening in elevators. Now this is happening in your own like bathtub when you're taking a shower. Any sort of closed space, you're starting to experience it. And so what happens is it generalizes. And to this point, a lot of people become agoraphobic. They can't leave their house. But the truth is you can totally overcome this. The truth is not through avoidance, but through exposure. But before you expose, you have to understand what's even happening. To learn more, follow this page.